This is just a sample of some of this information. These 25 books were taken from the text, and additional 20 supporting documents. So we're talking about 45 texts that disappeared 1,700 years ago. What happened before the beginning, the first and the second books of Adam and Eve? One of the most powerful technological books I've ever seen, The Secrets of the Prophet Enoch, speaking to us of the luminaries, with information so accurate it could not even be confirmed until the 20th century. Today, many of our scientific principles are spiritual properties, spiritual principles, practices, historic beliefs. I'm not saying they're wrong, and I believe we've done the best we could do with what we have. What I am saying is there's a very good possibility they're incomplete. Our science is good. The scientific method is good. However, we apply the scientific method where we believe there's a reason to use it. When these texts were lost, scientists found no reason to investigate a relationship between what happens in here and what happens out there. And that's changing now very quickly. This is the generation where that changes. There is one key that I believe above all other keys is so powerful. Those texts, many of them were written by a group called the ancient Essenes. And we're going to talk a lot about the Essenes tonight. The key that the Essenes left for us says this. It says simply that the world around us is a mirror of the beliefs that we harbor from within. They suggest that our world out there, although it looks solid, it looks tangible, that it is actually soft and malleable, like sculptor's clay. And instead of the hands of a sculptor that mold our external world, it is our consciousness. Quantum science, now in just the last 3 years, has made discoveries under laboratory conditions that are lending tremendous credence to this. This tenet, if the world out there mirrors what we are in here, it says the chaos of our changing world, the violence in our communities. People are saying, where's this violence come from? The violence in our communities, the unsettled weather patterns of nature are seen as mirrors of collective anger, rage, jealous competition, and hate that we harbor from within, on the one hand. The flip side of that, if this tenet holds true, the same view suggests that as we heal the personal challenges of our inner lives, and I know that's what these programs are all about, as we heal our inner challenges through forgiveness, understanding, tolerance, and compassion, that we may full well expect our outer world to mirror that to us as subtle patterns and gentle change. Do you believe in that? Do you believe there's any relationship whatsoever between the events unfolding in our world and what's happening in our body? Do you? You know that within the last 2 years, I could not have said this until the last 2 years, Western science, now I have to preface this, I was born and raised in a very conservative Midwestern community with no specific religious training, and my background in the academics and the hard sciences does not prepare me for what I'm about to share with you, because it makes no allowances for these relationships. Our own science now is finding a direct relationship between weather patterns and mass emotion in large population centers. Emotion is magnetic in nature. Barometric pressure responds to human emotion, to mass magnetics. The ancients have said that for a long time. We didn't understand what they were saying. We may have perhaps the single most powerful force. We may harbor that within us because what we become from within is determining, from this perspective, to a large degree, what we see in the world around us. Well, in some places unlikely, as these caves that are actually found 1,300 feet below sea level in an area known as Qumran, along the shores of the Dead Sea, this series of caves that we find along those shores, something happened in 1946 that forever changed the way we view our world. In that day, 2 Bedouin boys, they were sheep herders, did something they had done many times in the past. They were herding their sheep along those caves, and they threw stones into one of the openings. Only this time, something happened that had never happened before. They heard something break and shatter inside. And what they had heard was their stones striking a series of clay vases that had been sealed for almost 2,000 years. And inside these vases, sealed with straw and tar resin, they began to find scrolls. Scrolls of information that was recorded and hidden for safekeeping before the edits of the 4th century. Scrolls that had the texts, many that we had never seen before until we discovered these caves in 1946. By the way, they were reported to the world in 1947, and that's why many people believe 47 is the year of the discovery. Some of the scrolls were written, such as the ones you're seeing now. They were written on copper that was pounded so thin it became brittle over time. New technologies had to be developed so that we could even open and read these scrolls. And what they say to us today, in some respects, we have never seen with our eyes, although we felt in our hearts. Many of the scrolls were written in papyrus, the paper from that part of the world, made from a plant, much as you see in Egypt today. Some of the scrolls were written on animal hide, lamb skin. They were written in the languages, the ancient languages of Hebrew, Aramaic, the language of Jesus, as well as Greek. Some of these scrolls were no more than fragments, maybe an inch square. And when I began studying these, I asked myself, why don't we hear more about these? How many scrolls could there be? And what I discovered was that between 1946 and 1959, 11 caves were found with over 25,000 fragments of paper, papyrus, copper, and animal hide that comprised approximately 800 scrolls. And all of that information was given to a team of only 7 scholars. And they were all male. 7 male scholars. And as they began, if you can imagine, translating, compiling, editing, and preparing this information to be released, what was happening within them as they saw what it was that they had found. Perhaps one of the most interesting is the original book of Genesis. There was only one copy of this scroll found anywhere in these caves. For the first time, we saw the unedited version of the original book of Genesis. And the story goes on and on. It is through these scrolls that we find a tremendous amount of information about the background of the people that had recorded them, the ancient Essenes. The Essenes hold a lineage of wisdom that now is traced back over 4,000 years before Christ, 6,000 years ago. And what I'm sharing with you tonight, I could have done in many traditions. We could have done this in Buddhist traditions or Vedic traditions, Native North American, Native South American, Egyptian, Mayan. I'm sharing these traditions because in the West, these are the ones that we're looking to. And in their completeness, we may see something. The ancient Essenes wrote to a people they could only imagine in their dreams, in the only language that they knew. They wrote to us, sharing this wisdom. Through the insights left by the Essenes, we are just beginning to recognize 2 very powerful technologies. And I use that word intentionally, because these are technologies that allow us to determine the condition of our bodies, number 1, and number 2, the future of our world, because the Essenes say what's happening in here is mirrored out there. The first is a technology of prophecy. And by the way, for those of you who might find the word prophecy too new age or new thought-ish, prophecy is taken very seriously in our world today. Our scientists and researchers have given it a new name. They call it remote viewing. It's the ability to project our awareness through time, our senses, and to peer into distant future, past, or other possibilities in the present moment and record what is happening. So the first technology is prophecy. Allows us to witness future consequences of choices that we make in the present. If we do this and this now, how does it affect our world 1,000 years from now? The second is the technology of prayer, and I'm going to say this right now, a lost mode of prayer that is very different than any prayer we've seen in the West in a traditional sense. A mode of prayer that has no words. There are no words to this prayer. It has no outward expression. It is a consciousness that we achieve within as an inner technology, and I believe this is what Deepak is talking about. Although we've never